Kentucky Derby 2025, Godolphin Blue, Sovereignty winning the Kentucky Derby. Bill Mott picks up the win, a sloppy racetrack, and derbyologists predicted Sovereignty would win the 151st running of the Roses. I predicted Good Cheer to win the Kentucky Oaks. I followed the Kentucky Derby prospectus line for line, and Sovereignty was the horse to beat. He got reunited with Junior Alvarado, and Sovereignty destroyed this field. Sovereignty wins the Kentucky Derby 2025, and Godolphin Blue sweeps the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby, and it was all Sovereignty down the lane. He had a big warm-up before the race. Sovereignty looked like he was going to take some can today down the stretch. And of course, we had a fast pace. Neokos and Citizen Bull went at it for the first 6 furlongs. American Promise for the coach made his move coming into the turn. Then Journalism commenced his rally, but Sovereignty going wider, moving later, just like he showed in the Fountain of Youth, just like he showed in the Florida Derby. He was going to be the last one running, and just like he did at Churchill Downs in the Street Sense last fall, 9-1 odds, and I predicted Sovereignty all week. Sovereignty and Godolphin Blue winning the Kentucky Derby 2025. Let's get your reaction. What did you think of the muddy track? Sovereignty winning the Kentucky Derby, and Journalism second, Baeza third. Sovereignty wins the Kentucky Derby 2025. An exciting stretch run by Baeza, almost got second. Flavian Prat made a last stab at the finish line, but it was all Sovereignty finishing off the Kentucky Derby for trainer Bill Mott. Of course, he's by Into Mischief, and he had broke his maiden in a stakes race at Churchill Downs. He had missed a month of training back in January. He had gotten up on that short stretch, but basically he had that 10th post in the Florida Derby, and that's not a good post. So Sovereignty was really the horse to beat. He trained well all over the week at Churchill Downs. Of course, Junior Alvarado was injured, so he wasn't able to ride him in the Florida Derby. And surprisingly, really good odds on Sovereignty. He went down to 7-1. He was 9-1 all day long in the betting, but Sovereignty definitely a horse to be reckoned with as they move on to the second leg of the Triple Crown. Surprising betting odds. We had Luxor Cafe taking a lot of money. He was never on the screen. Burnham Square never really got involved. Final Gambit kind of made his move and then finished fourth. So the top 4 finishers in the Kentucky Derby: Sovereignty over Journalism. Then you had Baeza, and then the 4th place finisher was Final Gambit. Going to be a pretty big payoff with the top horse at 7-1 and the 4th place horse at 18-1. And even Baeza went off at 13-1. He took a little bit of late money as well. But when you look at the final fractions, double qualifiers, you had Final Gambit was 4th, Sovereignty was 1st, you had Journalism was 2nd, and those 3 came in the top 4. When you look at some of the pedigree information, you had a second mare that was a grade 2 stakes winner on Sovereignty, Mushka, an Empire Maker filly, and Sovereignty won the Kentucky Derby 2025. Journalism was 2nd. And, when we start off right at the beginning, Sovereignty moved up to the 16th post with the scratches. So he avoided the curse of post position 17. That post position is now 0 for 46 after winning after losing this Kentucky Derby. But Sovereignty had a lot going for him, and 7-1 odds was a nice price. Of course, Bill Mott, 12 Derby starters, 1 winner, but that was Country House, who was put up by disqualification. This is the first one across the finish line. Junior Alvarado is 0 for 5 in the Kentucky Derby, picks up his first win here, and He had 3 races as a 2-year-old, had made a nice move running second in a race at Belmont where he kind of tipped off some of his talent. And then he exploded in that street sense as a maiden. And then every race he's ran in his career, he's been the horse closing the fastest, showing that he wanted the distance. And he had ran on Churchill Downs dirt. That was a positive. And he was kind of a sustained runner, a final fractions qualifier, and one of the most highly regarded prep races, 25 Kentucky Derby winners coming out of the Florida Derby. And of course, Tappan Street was injured earlier this week. So that kind of moved up Sovereignty when you look at a list of the contenders. Now, the pedigree on Sovereignty, of course, by Into Mischief. He already had a couple of Derby winners. He had Mandaloon, who was put up by disqualification. He also had a winner in Authentic, who went wire to wire. Yes, Sovereignty wins. The big strapping son of Into Mischief got the job done. Yes, top 4 finishers, all double qualifiers. Just missing on that 3 furlong for Baeza. He was just over that 38 seconds, but he was a final qualifier on that fast final 8th. They all had good pedigrees. And of course, Sovereignty, that second mare was Mushka, a grade 1 stakes winner by Bernardini. And a lot of good things there. When you look at the speed figures, he had a nice pair moving up. I thought the Florida Derby speed figure was a little underrated. And yeah, basically those two hooked up. It was even for Journalism, even for Sovereignty, and he just outfinished them down the lane. Now, I will say Journalism might have made him move a little bit too soon, but who's to say? I mean, any other year, that probably wins the Derby, but he just got rammed down by a horse who started off the year as the Kentucky Derby future favorite. Then he lost some time with some training, and he really had looked good on the track all week. The workout reports were powerful, and his speed figures right there in the thoroughgraphs were in the top. His Florida Derby, his Ragozin was very strong. Now, Ragozin gave him a good Ragozin rating. Lisa, good job. Sovereignty, he had him picked for second, so hopefully he made a little bit of money. And really no surprises. Journalism second. A lot of people liked Baeza once he got in. And Final Gambit, actually, for a closer, I think with the stretch run, he had a double qualifier. But this Superfect is going to pay just because you beat Journalism on the front end. And the top 4 finishers were Sovereignty, Journalism, 3rd place finisher with Baeza, and then the 4th place finisher was Final Gambit. So Sovereignty wins the 151st running of the Kentucky Derby. It was all Sovereignty down the lane. Sovereignty, of course, broke his maiden at Churchill Downs. He was 1 for 1. He's 2 for 2. He got out of that dreaded 17th post, and Sovereignty winning that Kentucky Derby, you know, and out of the gate, Citizen Bull, he would have been disqualified anyways. He came out and mowed down half the field on the inside trying to get off the rail with Matt Garcia and interfered with a couple of horses and kind of came out on them. And then Citizen Bull set a fast pace. Exacta payouts, here they are. The exacta payouts are pick 5 was $1,500. We'll see the exacta in a moment here. Trifecta will pay good. And exacta was $48 for $2. So the exacta was $48. The 50-cent trifecta was $115, and the $2 50-cent pick 5 was $1,500. The super high 5 with Owen Almighty 5th was $38,405. So Lisa had Journalism first, Sovereignty second. Hopefully you box that exacta. But, you know, this was really one for the Kentucky Derby prospectus. Haven't seen the 202.31. So a little over 2 minutes and 2 seconds. The most exciting 2 minutes in sports does not disappoint in 2025 as Sovereignty gets it done on a very sloppy track. Niokos ran good to the turn. He brought down the smoke, but he couldn't finish off down the lane. But Owen Almighty at 40-1 ran 5th. part of a $40,000 superfecta. Sovereignty pays almost $18 to win and $7.50 to place. 2 minutes and 2 seconds. They were smoking at the mile mark, 136.84. Benedicara, she says thank you to Sovereignty, I guess. Winning time was 2:02.31, 2:02 and change. And that one was a nice one. I knew that after that Florida Derby, I picked Tappan Street in the Florida Derby. I saw the gallop out by Sovereignty. I didn't think they were really trying hard in that race. And beginning of the week, I picked Good Cheer. I picked Sovereignty. I was surprised at the 7-1. Baeza gets second. So, yeah, it was a good Derby. I think a very good performance. We'll see if he goes into the Preakness Stakes. In the Preakness Futures betting, he was 19-1. Sandman didn't run. That's a little bit of a surprising result. So, Sandman never really came running, but overall, Sovereignty wins the Kentucky Derby, Journalism second, third place was Baeza and a 2:02.31. And if you look at the Raisinative sire line, I believe we had some of those come in as well. Let's see, for Sovereignty, he did not have Raisinative in his sire line, so that was about the only factor that didn't work. But he had a grade 1 winning dam. He had a overall family. The average winning distance was 7.5. Now his dosage index was 4.33, but he did have Into Mischief had already sired a couple of Derby winners, and the track, when it stopped raining about 3 o'clock, so you knew. No, Sandman ran. He did not scratch. He ran in the race, and you look at the overall dosage. That was about the only thing that was kind of a little bit tricky on Sovereignty. But he had the grade 1 winning stakes winner, second mare. He had Bill Mott, who had won the Derby. You had a couple of horses that were questionable to get the distance. And overall, it was a type of race that looked like it was going to favor the closers when they went out and did 46 and change. There was a lot of speed in the race, and Tistastic never really got going. But, when you look at some of the other results of the day, you did have some closers in earlier races at Churchill Downs. And so, you had Copian coming from off the pace. Turf races were pretty exciting. I think some good jockey rides in that race. Final Gambit had a little bit of trouble. Luan Machado. The Japanese horse took a lot of money, but I don't know. That might have been better on I think it was 115 for the try. And Marty says Sandman never likes Churchill Downs, and Martin Garcia, yeah, he came out of the gate and just smoked a couple of horses. That was actually a pretty bold move by American Promise coming into that backstretch. And overall, you look at a horse like Sovereignty, who did have 3 races as a 2-year-old, and then this was his 3rd race off a layoff, and Japan now 0 for 9 in the Kentucky Derby. This one was a fast-paced, big field. A lot of the better horses, I think you wanted to be drawn more outside in this race. And I think, with Citizen Bull smashing a couple of horses, I'm always skeptical of a Triple Crown, especially when the winner wins in the slop. He's got to turn around in 2 weeks. Maybe Bill Mott even just points for the Belmont. But we'll see. He's a little bit more old school. And Godolphin, yes, after about 30 years of trying, finally got it done with a homebred. And, Sovereignty didn't have the best of starts, but he was always kind of in that mid-pack. Triple Crown is hard to win. Plus, this year, the Belmont Stakes is only 1.25 miles. It's at Saratoga. It's not 1.5 miles. But again, now there is some good new shooters getting ready for the Preakness Stakes. Horses like Rodriguez Possibility, Clever Again, Heart of Honor, who ran in the UAE Derby, may possibly come over. Steve Asmussen's got a nice runner, and Clever Again. So we'll see, but I think we'll probably get about 3-4 horses out of the Derby that go on to the Triple Crown, to the Preakness Stakes in a couple of weeks under Old Hilltop, and we'll have to see about the tight turns of Pimlico. Journalism ran a huge race. Now there's one, since he didn't win the Derby, they may just wait for the Belmont. They can't win the Triple Crown. Sandman was 7th. So that was a good run from Sandman. And, he was sitting pretty far back. And Godolphin really just had their horses in tip-top shape. Good Cheer was undefeated. And Triple and Exacta for LK. So we've got some winners. If you hit any bets on the Kentucky Derby, let me know. What did you think of Citizen Bull coming out of the gate? A lot of action, really. Citizen Bull. Easy Goer told everybody that Journalism was overrated, and of course Journalism finished 2nd. Baeza 2nd. That would have been a really huge Exacta and trifecta. And Flavian Prat, I thought, rode really well. Baeza kind of made his move right behind Journalism and Sovereignty. And Baeza, he's lightly raced, and haven't seen the final result on Tistastic or Publisher. We'll have to see if Sovereignty goes to the Preakness. I would assume that he does. He was 20-1 in the betting today, if you bet him before today's pools, which actually was pretty long. Journalism was 5-1. Sandman was 14-1. American Promise was 15-1. And overall, a fast pace, and it was some horses got in trouble when Neokos made that move. American Promise kind of came up the inside, and you saw the jockey and Neokos kind of looking inside at American Promise. But American Promise kind of flattened out first. Neokos led him into the stretch, and then by that time, Journalism was already making his move, and you kind of knew that Journalism was going to be right there. So, this was one where it depended on the speed figures that you looked at. Ragozin gave the Florida Derby a good speed figure. Thorograph gave Sovereignty a good speed figure. Bayer had a speed figure low on the Florida Derby, but Brisnet gave it a pretty good speed figure. So I think Martin Garcia, it's been 10 years he's been in the Derby. He's not really an A-plus rider. I'm surprised they didn't change to Mike Smith after the scratch of Rodriguez. Sirius won the Superfecta. Of course, the Sovereignty winning. Bill Mott being interviewed on Churchill Downs simulcast feed right now. So some big wins for Bill Mott, but pretty impressive overall for Sovereignty. Trying to get some of the other runners. Neokos ran his odds. Owen Almighty was up there near the pace. The Spacetown kind of kicked in, that sloppy breeding on him. Luxor Cafe was kind of a disappointment. He was never in it. Burnham Square was never in it. So the curse of the Bluegrass kind of continues. Flying Mohawk was never in it. East Avenue never really got a call there. And Publisher and Tistastic, Steve Asmussen, now 0 for 28 in the Kentucky Derby. He had a couple of long shots here, though. Publisher was 33-1. Tistastic was 24-1. And let's see. Chunk of Gold never really, kind of ran evenly. Owen Almighty was the one that kind of made a mid-race move. Baeza, I thought, ran well. So that's kind of an overall look at the Kentucky Derby. And I thought the prospectus kind of narrowed it down once we got into some of the contenders, as we really had, I think you had some horses that like Flying Mohawk was kind of hard to take. Neokos had kind of a suspect pedigree. Owen Almighty had a suspect pedigree. Now, they both ran well, but if you kind of eliminated some of the horses with the Citizen Bull had a 9 dosage. He had ran 4th in his last race. And Kevin was a big fan of Bill Mott. And Smarty says, great training job from Bill. It was an honest race. The 2 best horses duked it out. Sovereignty overpowered journalism. That's what I would say. We had some formful races. We had some favorites winning today, but some shots were running second, and then they couldn't just close it off. And RSH keyed to 18 with 2, 8, 9, and 21. Could have had the try, but hit the exacta, so he's happy. I think he paid $54 double with the 10 coming into that race. So overall, pretty solid running lines. And yeah, I think Sovereignty, the key was that he had missed about a month of training. So he got behind on his workouts. He didn't have any workouts till mid-January. And then he won that Fountain of Youth really off just a couple of workouts. And then you kind of knew that by winning that race, he got fit. And then I think Tappan Street just got the jump on him in the Florida Derby, but he still closed, still galloped out nice. And, for a lot of rain, some pretty big performances from horses like Copian. And I thought some of the turf races were some strong performances. 202, I think with the fast pace, we ended up with a slow final time, but the bulk of the race was run in the last half mile with both Journalism and Sovereignty kind of making their move. And then after American Promise kind of flattened out going into the turn, it was probably the first move from Owen Almighty. And then Neoquos basically had the lead. And then Owen Almighty was second. Coming into the stretch, Neokos was on the lead, a 40-1 shot. Owen Almighty was second, but then Journalism was right there. And then you had Sovereignty right behind him. And then out in the middle of the track, the Big Gray Final Gambit came running up and ended up in 4th place. So Elijah Emmanuel, he won the race with Sovereignty. Sovereignty, take note, he had the points entering the Florida Derby, no reason to force him. And then I like the fact that they kind of stayed there an extra week in Florida while it was still cold. And then they shipped up a few days before Tappan Street. He did get a workout over the Churchill track. I thought he had a powerful workout earlier this week. He continued to gallop well throughout the week. And Citizen Bull, kind of more of a 9 dosage, Sprinter's more pedigree. He's by Into Mischief as well, but he's got horses like Evil Elaine and some other sprinters in that pedigree. So, I think overall, when you look at the fractions, I think it was a fast street. And Tappan Street, he was going to be my Derby pick before they scratched him. And then I went to Sovereignty because I just thought the Florida Derby was the best prep race of the year. So I kind of just stuck with that as a barometer. Plus, I like the final fractions. I like the mare. I thought overall they had a plan. At the beginning of the year, they said they wanted 2 preps. And they said either Holy Bull and Bluegrass, or maybe the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby, or the Fountain of Youth and the Bluegrass. Since he ran and won the Fountain of Youth, that's when they decided that they were going to stay there for the Florida Derby. And why ship a couple of times? Sometimes you can get some sloppy weather and some cold weather for that Bluegrass. So I think overall, it was a good decision, and they just stayed there. They didn't have to ship until they needed to, Derby week or a week before Derby week. And then they pretty much had him out galloping every day, and he was doing some extended gallops. I think it was a big moved from Junior Alvarado. He got hurt the week of the Florida Derby. So they had to call in another jockey to ride him in the Florida Derby, and he had never ridden the horse. And I think Bill Mott just said, just get him around the track, and he got a nice move. I think he got some good conditioning out of it, 1 1/8 miles. And then, at the end of the day, you look at, thanks a lot, Sirius, for supporting the show. Yes, thanks. And that's what you want. You want no more than 2-3 starts as a 2-year-old. And then you kind of want third start off the layoff or a winning type move. And I'm not sure where Godolphin's buying the beers, but yeah, hopefully the stables and the help tonight have a big beer party because that was an impressive race for Sovereignty. The grooms had the horses ready to row. I think Bill Mott, we brought him to Churchill Downs last year to get experience over the track. And then when you look at what he was able to accomplish, Sovereignty was able to roll just down the lane. And we'll see if he goes on to the Preakness. I think he's the type of horse that can be competitive at 1 3/16 miles. The two-week turnaround is always a key for the Preakness. And journalism, since he can't win the Triple Crown, they may not run in the Preakness. It would be pretty awesome to see a rematch in the Preakness in a smaller field, maybe even a dry track. Sovereignty definitely seemed to relish that sloppy track, drying out track. I think it didn't hurt journalism at all. Of course, he's by Curlin, and Curlin won the Breeders' Cup Classic in the slop. And that was one of the sloppiest tracks I've ever seen at Monmouth. And thank you for watching. He watches every year, says he learned a lot on the trail this year. We had a lot of videos. I thought the prospectus had a lot of information if you really dove into it and really dived into the pedigree information, the post positions. I do think it's important what post they get and where the speed is. And I think the pace of the race was fast. And so I think the pace is going to come up fast. And I kind of predicted a fast pace. And with Sovereignty not in there, it still was a fast pace in the race. So I think that was one of the keys when I started liking Sovereignty as a potential type horse that could run big in this race. And then also, journalism, he had the pedigree, had a nice trainer, but he'd only face those 3-horse fields. He'd only really face Baeza. Now, they both ran well. So really, it was a pretty formful race. You just had Sovereignty, who should have been the second favorite. The crowd kind of just played the gray Sandman. He had all the social media hype. He had a bunch of owners. So I think truly, Florida and Santa Anita Derby are still the key preps. And that's true every year. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. The best horses go to Florida. If they can't win the Florida Derby, that's when they start shipping to Gulfstream or to Tampa Bay, the Wood Memorial, the Fairgrounds, and the Bluegrass. The 2 races they point for is the Florida Derby, and then the best horses from the West Coast point for the Santa Anita Derby. Now, the purse gets smaller every year at Santa Anita, so I don't know if that's going to hold. I mean, that Oaklawn, Arkansas Derby purse is $1.5 million. The Rebel purse is $1 million. I'm surprised some of these horses don't go after that purse money. But again, they don't like to ship. Everybody wants these horses to ship, but when you look at it, Sovereignty never shipped. Baeza never shipped. Final Gambit never shipped. He stayed at Turfway Park all winter. And journalism never shipped. And, even Sandman, who was 7th, he stayed at Oaklawn Park all winter. And, that was a very fast pace. So you kind of had to judge who was really the best horse because the horses up on the front end kind of faded off the pace. I don't think Baeza will go to the Preakness. He ran a nice race today. I guess I would go to the Belmont. because if Sovereignty were to go to the Preakness and lose the Preakness, he probably won't go to the Belmont. Journalism might wait for the Belmont. Usually you start to narrow down some of these horses that want to continue on and try to go on for the Triple Crown. You know, the Arkansas Derby, big purse. They usually get the biggest fields. So we'll see. I think there should be some better horses coming out of this year. We just had some goofy paces in the Arkansas races, and I'm not sure the best horses won. Like when Coal Battle won, I'm not so sure he was the best horse. And Kevin enjoyed the podcast the weeks leading up to the race, Godolphin Blue and Bill Mott getting the job done. Of course, we start turning our attention to the tight turns of Pimlico, but very impressive race overall from some of these horses, and a big win for Sovereignty. And Henry is in the house. Henry, he knew that Sovereignty was going to rock and roll. Had the spinal fractions, Mushka, the big second dam, and a lot of pedigree into mischief. And even though they scratched Grande this week and Rodriguez, we finally had, after some years of horses like Golden Sense producing a winner, and yes, kind of some weird horses that never won a race. I just kind of have a feeling Sovereignty's a little bit better than some of the horses the last 2-3 years. But Sovereignty had a huge warm-up. I don't know if you watched that. When they showed the warm-up, he got a full gallop down the back stretch, almost a half-mile warm-up. Junior Alvarado gave him a huge warm-up in this race. So, you know, there's still some races at Churchill. You've got the 13th and the 14th, some big fields, still a sloppy, drying out track. Yes, the great race. Hats off to the winner, jockey and trainer, Junior Alvarado, Bill Mott, and yeah, a lot of money in the win pool. Surprisingly, almost $18 for Sovereignty on the win end. And Sovereignty now with that win, overall, his record, you know, there's a lot to like here when you look at Sovereignty, considering he broke his maiden in the street sense, and that was at Churchill Downs, and then came back and won this race at Churchill Downs. And the second mare is Mushka, crowned, and done much. And that was another thing. The siblings were kind of some early speed horses, and Sovereignty was more of a closer. Yeah, Final Gambit, he was clobbered early, kind of had to check on the turn. I'm not so sure he would have won. I thought Journalism and Sovereignty got the jump on him, but so I think there was definitely some mid-race moves by Journalism and Sovereignty. Final Gambit, he did have some trouble at the beginning of the race. Then he had some checking trouble. I thought he ran his race to get fourth. I just don't know if he had a chance to really win the race. He would have needed maybe to save some ground. But he just couldn't save any ground. He did save a little bit of ground after the beginning of the race, but lost some trouble after that start and kind of had to regroup. Journalism really had a wide trip, but he never had to check it. I'll have to watch the replay. We'll be doing a trip note show on the Derby in the next couple of days, getting that out. But yeah, I think overall, very positive from Sovereignty. So we're going to recap this race later on tonight. I'll do a video. Tomorrow we'll take some look at some of the trip notes. But the Derby prospectus out, and we'll see if we can come up with a smaller Preakness pedigree information. And yeah, he may have clipped heels early, but that's going to do it. Give me your final thoughts in the comments on Sovereignty winning the Kentucky Derby 2025. Bernardini, the dam sire, and grandsire, the runner-up, both have big heart gene. Just an observation. And your betting assistant says this Derby was too easy. Sovereignty wins the 2025 Kentucky Derby.